Max, assuming regardless of whoever wins this fight, what's next for these guys? I mean, it feels like they exhausted all their options going into building up 5 years for this fight. Is there anything left for either guy or a big fight out there?
See what happens in this fight, man. If it's a competitive fight, they'll do it again.
You think they will?
We're never going to do it again. Yeah, okay. So Floyd's going to make $200 million, and Pacquiao's going to make $120 million, and they're not going to do it again. If there's more demand, they could go to 250 and 180 or something. Yeah, I think if it's a real competitive fight, particularly if the outcome is disputed, and if it's an exciting fight to boot, of course they're going to do it again. Why wouldn't they do it again?
Do you think Floyd goes for the 50-0?
It's interesting. This is funny because at the boxing writers' dinner the other night, Gennady Golovkin was presented with some kind of award for having the highest knockout percentage in middleweight title history. Now, first of all, as much as I love Golovkin and consider him now kind of a consensus middleweight champion, never actually won the lineal belt. So a lot of those belt defenses are, is that the same thing that Carlos Monzon or Sugar Ray Robinson did? Not exactly. And then also, and this is really the bigger point for me, at this moment, he has the highest knockout percentage in the history of middleweight title fights. Because his career's in progress. John Mugabe, I'm sure at one point held that
26.
He was, or Julian Jackson or someone like that. There were other fighters in the past who at one point had that record. So we're talking about 50-0 because 49-0 is Rocky Marciano. Julio Cesar Chavez got to 87-0. 87-0 when he fought and lost to Purnell, although that was called a draw. So, hasn't that record already been broken? That record can't exist until you can't establish that record until you retire and stay retired. And so really what that means is until you die, it's not the record because there's always the possibility that you can come back. Joe Calzaghe retired undefeated. But with 46 wins? I don't remember. It was 46.
41 or something.
46.
Oh, no, 46. Yeah.
But Chavez, so if the point is just to get to that number without a loss, then Chavez beat that already, 87-0. Nelson Bolanos, the guy Vinny Pazienza knocked out in the 80s, got to 53-0 or something like that. I mean, guys have had a lot of wins without a loss. The silliness of that record, even though it's for sure, it's something titillating about it, it captures your imagination. But the silliness about it is what you do after the fact affects the record. Pete Rose isn't in the Hall of Fame because he gambled on baseball. But to me, it's but he already had the 4,200 hits. What does that got? How does that negate his hits? Come on, dummies.
Yep.
Right? Well, it's the same thing. So if you get to 50-0, you got the record. Now, let's say you retire for 2 or 3 years, and then a huge offer comes. The stock market goes down, you lose your money, whatever. You get divorced, you have child support, a promoter robs you, taxes, whatever it is. Now you're broke. You get sued, and you need the money. Someone offers you big money 2-3 years later, you come back and you lose. Now you don't have the record anymore. Did you already set it? Or does it don't? What does that have to do with what you've already done? So this is part of the silliness with comparing Floyd to Sugar Ray Robinson. Sugar Ray Robinson had 130 wins before his second loss, and his first loss was to an all-time great middleweight in his prime, Jake LaMotta, who outweighed Robinson by 15 pounds, and it was a close fight. And Robinson beat him 5 other times. And then his next loss was at 130 wins to that one loss, a couple draws. And it was to Randy Turpin, an awkward, really good fighter overseas where Robinson was already way past his prime because back then 32, 33, you're way past your prime, especially if you had 130 fights and a whole amateur career with no headgear and all that, which was back in the day. And Turpin was awkward and everything, and Robinson eventually loses again. But at one point he's 130-1, right? The undefeated thing was never as impressive. There's a heavyweight record if you want to do the counting records, but it's not 49-0. It's 25. Title defenses, Joe Louis. That's the heavyweight record that people that has more meaning. Defend your heavyweight championship 25 times. It's ridiculous. That's, what you lose a fight after the fact, who cares?
Let me ask you this. We talk about undefeated record. And a lot of people criticize Floyd for liking having his undefeated record.
Well, listen, I don't want to... If you fight everybody and you always win, that counts extra. We need to see how you come back from a loss. Not if you fight everyone and you always win. That, common sense dictates that is the best thing you can do. If Floyd had fought Mosley in his prime, Margarito when he was rapping, Pacquiao 5 years ago...
Does he beat all those guys, Max, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think so. That's
what
the
about
reason...
Paul Williams?
Yeah, I think Floyd beats Paul Williams, but there's another
Sergio
guy.
Martinez at 154?
I think at a certain point, it's fair to say, I'm not moving up and fighting an even bigger guy. Like at a certain point, Floyd's come up from 130. We're a little spoiled because Pacquiao came up from $112, so we think that, like, boy, you could just keep going up. 30, 35, 40, 47, and then dip your toe in the water at 54. I think that's plenty. I don't think it's fair to say he ducked Sergio Martinez. He's not ducking Golovkin. You don't want to get knocked out by a guy who's bigger than you. I get it, you know. But Golovkin's not ducking Vladimir Klitschko. He's just not big enough to fight him.
So could have Floyd reached the level that he's reached today, not being undefeated? Because so many people say, oh, it doesn't matter if you're undefeated or not.
I think he could. This is the interesting thing about Floyd. I wanted to see him fight Margarito because I thought he beat him. And I thought he would get a lot of credit for it. And I think sometimes the athlete, who's also running a business after all, has to put his business interests first and say, well, if I'm going to get $8 million for fighting Margarito or $8 million for fighting Carlos Baldemir, what am I, an idiot? Of course I'm going to fight Carlos Baldemir for $8 million. And he did, and he won. He won the lineal welterweight championship. Yeah. That's fair. But on the other hand, you do get legitimately criticized, or at least you suffer in a comparison with other fighters who maybe didn't put their business interests first, or maybe weren't good enough at putting their business interests first, right? So that's legit. I think he would have beaten Paul Williams, Antonio Margarito, raps or no raps, Pacquiao in his prime. I think he'd be favored at least, you know. And who do we mention? Costa Zoo. Mosley in his prime. I think Floyd wins all those fights. That's why I wanted to see him do it. You want to watch you want a fighter like Floyd to establish the resume that starts to challenge Sugar Ray Robinson. In fact, you know, you want to see that.
Do you feel the same way about Pacquiao? Is there any fight you would want to see Pacquiao in that we didn't get to see, or that?
I would have liked to see Pacquiao and Mosley fight when Mosley was a little younger. I think that would have been a great fight. No, Pacquiao fought everybody.